So I don't know how I can make this sound like we recorded it in one session, because that is just completely not the case. But
Different
if you
days.
are diving fresh into this episode of Slightly Rebellious, because I gave it a name now, you'll know that I am back here with one of my best friends, Katie Phillips. And we decided that doing a part two to our last conversation was a very good idea, because we
Mm.
could have rambled on for a long time but didn't want to make a 7 hour, Tolkienian epic of a podcast. So here we are, back for round two. How you doing?
Really good. And I truly, if there was an option to do a 7 hour podcast, you would be the person I would do that with. So if that's something we need to do later, keep me posted.
Yeah, there's probably going to be a round three after
I
this,
know.
or maybe some actual play D&D podcast or something.
Yeah.
I don't
Oh, I'm
know.
in. Yeah, I'm already in.
Let's enter that space. Um, but anyway, so you and we decided last time to catch everybody up. So we spoke
Mm.
about your love of communication,
Yes.
and everyone should definitely go and listen to part one, because it was a freaking masterclass in how to make you communicate better.
Thank you.
But we didn't touch on all of the really, really cool shit that makes you you. And
Mm.
because I know you, I know
Yeah.
that there's a lot of that. And you and I vibe on a whole bunch of the similar things. And we had the question to ask ourselves: how do our hobbies influence how we show up as a professional?
Yes.
Which is a huge question. So, what kind of stuff does Katie Phillips get up to outside of work?
It's such an interesting point to start. What it makes me think of is when I lead trainings or I facilitate for, really corporate environments, and they always want to know, and I want to know about them as well, the people I'm working with. What are your hobbies, and what do you do outside of work? And mine have become so normal to me that it doesn't feel strange to share. But then as soon as I do, I definitely sense a change in the room. So my hobbies, the things that I care about a lot outside of work, are martial arts is a big one, particularly Tabuada Balintuak Eskrima, which is a Filipino martial art, and I've been doing it for, hang on, as I math for a moment, about 7 or 8 years. And it's with sticks, sometimes with knives, but typically it's you and another person fighting with sticks. So I train Balintuak and I teach Balintuak, and it's really vitally important to me as a person. When I lived in Durham, North Carolina, I'm currently in Asheville, I did axe throwing as well. I was in an axe throwing league, which is like bowling, but with axes, and that really carried me through the pandemic shutdown. And I have a lot of love for everyone that I did that with. So it's martial arts, it's axe throwing. My husband trains martial arts, so we're just in it as a family. And he's an incredible martial artist. He does everything that you can think of. Um, and then when I'm not doing all of those, I read quite a lot. And the most commonly visited genre in my life is the haunted house book genre. So it's just a very specific niche of reading that I go to frequently. So I'm either fighting, throwing things at a board, or reading about people probably fighting their way out of something that they would need to throw at a board. Would be the three main ones, I would guess.
Nice.
Yeah,
So they're all quite physical things. The
yeah.
haunted house genre is quite a physical. It
You like sweat
provokes
a
a
lot.
response, sweaty palms.
Mhm.
Um, where did the martial arts journey start?
That started when I was about 23. I was at a networking event, and I met someone there who really seemed to handle themselves very well. And
Mm.
I wanted to know how to carry myself that well. I had, at that point in my life, I thought peaked, which is hilarious. I had just so funny, and I was really concerned about it. I had, when I graduated college, I was the student body president, which is still one of my favorite things I've ever done. And then I was really involved in the community. I had gotten this big community college award, and then I did a TEDx talk. And then from there, I also had this really fancy, very cool corporate job. And I was 23, and I thought, I've done everything I'm ever going to do. What else is there? And so there was this lacking feeling of needing a challenge and something to fight through. So I started with Kempo Jiu-Jitsu, and I was in that for quite some time. A very good introduction to the world. And I, through a lot of experiences, found Blintwalk, which was very much like that feeling of I came into the room for one thing, but here's what I actually needed. And so I'm very grateful to have that first experience, whatever it was, good, bad, ugly, in between, so that I could get to Blintwalk, which is very much my home. And getting to Blintwalk, there's this quote from Game of Thrones, the book, that I haven't read. Just bear with me, but my friend says it a lot. And it's when I believe Khal Drogo gives Khaleesi a horse, and she doesn't know how to say it, but she says, "If you could please thank him for me, for he has given me the wind." And that's how it feels to train Blintwalk. It feels like you're riding the wind, and I'm so grateful for it. So that's how I got to Blintwalk, very gratefully.
I love that when you find an extension of yourself that you didn't. I was like, you didn't know was there. See,
Yeah.
I believe in quantum possibility that like everything
Ooh.
that we are meant to do already exists. We just have to find our way to it.
Yeah. Yes.
And it sounds like that was it for you. Like it was always going to be there. Maybe you knew what it was or didn't, but
Yeah. It's a great theory.
what's it like getting hit with sticks? I
Hurts
know
so much. It
that's a
hurts really bad. Let's just be honest. It's not comfortable. Um, it makes me think of. Have you seen the movie Green Street Hooligans?
I had. Was that the one with
The old
Elijah
football
Wood?
movie. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And Charlie
Yeah,
Hunnam back forever, 100 years
way
ago.
back when. Yeah,
But his whole thing is he's a journo. Sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful to your culture. He's a journalist, and
yeah.
he's just call him a journo all the time. But he's undercover, and he goes and he gets in the fights after the games, and he has this voiceover where he's like getting punched in the face in slow motion, and he says, it's really scary. And then the moment you learn that you're not made of glass, you become a new version of yourself. Getting hit with sticks hurts really, really bad. Getting punched is worse, but being able to get in there and to know that you're not going to completely break apart, that you do have something else in you, that's a really magical feeling. So that resilience is worth fighting through to find.
Mm. Yeah, I guess there's nothing that prepares you for that.
No.
Like, because you telling me this now, like, yeah, it really hurts. It sucks.
Yeah.
I, the only way for me to find that out would be for you to whack
Like
me
hit
with
you with a stick.
in the controlled environment,
Yes.
because it's not like
Yeah.
treading on Lego or a plug.
No, it's not a surprise.
No, it's like this is a very deliberate thing which you have to physically and mentally prepare yourself for.
And the one thing I've found over and over again, and this correlates to the work I do in communication as well. There's a very real difference between um, playing and training, and you get hit in the process versus someone coming at you with the intent to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find both at seminars. But when you're with a teacher that you trust, when you're with a training partner that you trust, and you get kind of whacked on the finger, you're like and then you get back in it, versus the times when I've been in a really bad mood, or I've been hungry or annoyed or just not in a good place mentally, or I'm working with someone that I don't trust or know very well. Those hits literally hit differently. You can feel it. And there's so much to be said for the intention behind what we say and what we do and the impact that it makes. So when
Mm.
you're in that training space, and you're there to learn and you're there to play, it's so different. You're like, a little one, that's okay, let's keep going. Versus when you are not vibing with the person you're training with and they hit you, it just feels bad. So that's something I've noticed for sure, is that it's all about, Balintawak is two people training together,
Mm-hmm.
and we call it a gak, which is Filipino for play. And when you are in that play space and you're going back and forth and you get a little one, you're okay because you know where you are and you know what you're doing. And I've always appreciated that knowledge, is that when you trust the person you're working with, it's not, they're not coming for you to hurt you, they're coming for you to play.
Yeah. Mm. I love that sentiment of play,
Me too.
and to a degree, fun, isn't it? I mean, if it wasn't
Yeah.
fun, you wouldn't do it.
No. Well, me
Well,
in
or
particular,
would you?
it's such a funny question. Me in particular, I wouldn't introduce myself as, hi, I'm Katie Phillips. I'm a real fun seeker. I'm a real fun kind of gal. That's not how I describe myself. I'm not like the most, like, my husband's really fun. Like, he's like a fun person to be around. Everything he does is more fun when he's there. I'm like not, um, I don't know what the antithesis is. I don't know what the other word is, but I do like, I appreciate the hard work of it. I appreciate the feeling of preparing for a challenge, of getting ready for an arena, of, like the get in shape montages of every Rocky movie where he's just like miserable. I'm like, yes, like there's something about that that feels really good to me. It helps that it's more fun than it's not. But like the
True.
training sessions I've had where they're just grueling and I'm frustrated and breaking through some kind of wall, I find just as beneficial because again,
Mm,
it's not a need, but I appreciate it that it can be fun. Yes.
yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, it is very fun. That's just me personally.
I think the further up the tree that you go, there's always going to be some overarching element of fun and enjoyment to it.
Agreed.
Always, like, because if at some point you know when you hate something, right? You know when
Yes.
you just go, "F this, I'm out,"
Hmm.
like, and you know you're never going back.
Yeah.
But this very much sounds like it is a place and a space set up for learning,
Yeah.
collaboration,
Hmm.
play. So there feels like a big crossover here between what you do as a communication trainer, expert, legend. Um,
There's my LinkedIn profile. I gotta go.
yeah,
I gotta
just
make
get
an
make
update.
just make sure you get the semicolons in the right place. You'll be fine. But it feels like there's a crossover here between what you do as a martial arts trainer, which
Mm,
is a very personal thing,
yeah.
but also the communications training for professional people, which is
Yes.
also a very personal thing.
Mm, hmm.
What's that about?
I think the Venn diagram of communication and Balenciaga crosses at problem solving.
Okay.
So from a Balenciaga view, someone's coming at you with a stick. That's a problem, and you have to solve it. And one thing I really appreciate from Grandmaster Bobby Tabawada, who is our creator, founder, leader, when he was building the system, the entire curriculum fits on one page, like one Microsoft Word page, but it's so in depth. And the purpose of it was to give you options. So if someone's coming at you with a stick, you can run, you can yell, you can tackle them, you can get your own stick, you can respond. Similarly with communication, someone comes at you sideways, someone has a comment that you weren't ready for, you have a lot of options. And that's
Mm,
something that I say in every training. I don't know if it's revolutionary, but it's important to remember that if you're speaking, you can always leave. You can go.
yeah.
You can freak out on them. You can say the worst thing possible that shows up in your mind. Those are options at the buffet that you're at. Or you can take a breath. You can respond. You can say nothing. You can pass it to someone else. There are so many options in front of you. And that, I think, the problem solving and the options, those are two things that really freed me
Mm,
because for a long time, it was just about being perfect. How can I tell the perfect story? How can I give the perfect presentation, the perfect answer when hanging out with my friends and someone asks a question? Just these unnecessary goals that didn't really matter.
yeah.
And it was the same when I first started training martial arts was how can I do it perfectly? And truthfully, you can't. If someone tackles you and knocks the wind out of you, you don't operate perfectly. I had an old teacher I really respected say, "We train for a 10 so that we can get a 5 out there in the world at best, because you just need to get home." So knowing the options is something that I try to let people know frequently. This is one way we do it. This is what the curriculum offers. What other ways do you see? What feels good to you? So I think it's the options and the problem solving that really connect the two together.
Mm, absolutely. The thing that popped into my head there was responsiveness versus
Mm,
being reactionary.
agreed.
And you never know how you're going to respond when you get punched
No.
physically or verbally, or
Well said.
someone tries
Yeah.
to trip you up on purpose or not. Um, how I still struggle with that
Mm, same.
quite often, quite a lot, and I think maybe it's just a part of being a human being that there is always the worst thing you could say, and that for some reason that is the first thing that comes to your head every time. Right in the middle,
Hmm.
it's like somebody does something and you just want to hurl a chair.
Hmm.
How how have both of these arenas then could have helped with that react being more responsive and less reactive?
It is a constant learning process that
Mm.
comes with a lot of self-patience. Uh, what I had one teacher who was a combat veteran, and so all of his lessons were so cool and gross. So cool and so gross. And what I remember the most from what he said is that when you're in an actual combat situation, which for the record I've never ever in my entire life, nor do I want to be. That's important. This is an aside. If you meet a martial arts instructor and they're like, I can't wait to get jumped at the grocery, like that's not someone you need to train with.
Mm-hmm.
Go find somebody who never wants to use this in real life because that's,
Yeah.
there's a whole other thing there. Um, so he said in a combat situation, you are trying to buy yourself milliseconds. And I think about that with the communication difference between reacting and responding, because it is a difference of milliseconds. It's a difference between, someone says something, maybe they didn't even mean to be offensive or rude or weird. They just said whatever was on their mind. You got to buy yourself some milliseconds with a breath to decide, am I going to attack the target that I think is in front of me? Or am I going to consider curiosity or a question or saying nothing, which is always an option?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. It's hard. I think it reminds me of a conversation you and I have had before where I was, I think, lamenting really messing up a personal conversation. And I said to you, I'm a professional communicator and I totally ruined this moment. And you actually told me you are a professional, but you're also a person who's communicating. And
Yeah.
you got to differentiate that, particularly, I think, people in our lines of work, people who are maybe in different boats but on the same river as us, who are helpers or consultants or coaches or trainers. You are that person, but you are also a person being a person. And I
Yeah.
think once you differentiate those two, you free yourself up from a lot of shame. And
Oh.
yeah, a lot of shame. And I think with Blinswalk too, it taught me to mess up and keep going.
Yeah.
Because I used to, when I first started, I would get so stuck. If I did the wrong move, I would just, be stuck in it. And that's not the way movement works. And it's not the way conversation works. It's you got to keep going.
You do. I, there's a beauty to that. That it can become very improvisational.
Yeah.
You know, you know the moves. You know how to ask an open question or a closed question. You know how to say something to open the room up or shut the room down. You know how
Yeah.
to do an offensive move versus a defensive one.
Hmm.
But when it happens in however these conversations occur, a combat conversation or a verbal one,
Yeah.
it's improvised
Hmm.
every time. And yeah, you're absolutely right. And I do remember that conversation, you know. And as soon as you can allow yourself to be that person who is
Hmm.
an improviser first,
Yeah.
everything gets easier.
Agreed.
Because it only matters what happens, as you say. I love the milliseconds thing, and I need to remember that. I must remember that. Is that the breath provides the milliseconds for you to respond and improvise something new.
Yes. Yeah. Let's build a new way. It doesn't have,
Yeah,
I could be wrong. That's
This is
important to
it.
remember. Yeah.
This is it. Like you probably are, and that's
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. I as a consultant, sometimes I picture myself, well, just as a person, I also picture myself as like the mom from Terminator 2 or like John Wick.
Oh,
That's just how I see myself, which is I'm actually a very soft person, but that's how I see myself.
it's how I
And
understand that. I
yeah,
get
thank
that.
you. Yeah. And as a consultant, I often see myself as like an anomaly hunter. I'm like trying to find the thing that sticks out because part of being a consultant is you want to fix the problem. You want to
Mm,
spot the anomaly and fix it. And so as human beings, we're full of anomalies. We're full of weird stuff, and it comes out in our conversation. I don't do myself or my relationships any favors to just constantly like shoot at an anomaly and just say that's weird, that's weird, that's weird, because we all
yeah,
are, and life is weird. So I've tried to, particularly recently, just release a lot of the need to let people know that I see the weird stuff about them, unless it's really cool and exciting and celebratory,
yeah,
or I'm curious. Otherwise, it's like I try to keep in mind that no one wants to be fixed without asking, and if they want help, they'll ask you. So
yeah.
I think conversationally, that's a good shield to just keep at all times, or a good filter, perhaps.
A personal filter.
Yeah,
I
yeah. They
like
didn't
that.
ask. They didn't ask to be helped, fixed, advised. They'll ask.
Yeah. Mm. I'm aware we've gone down a deepish hole here.
We have. I
We've gone
know.
down quite a serious hole.
I know.
But
Yeah.
just to pull it back,
Yeah.
to put our fun nerdy hats on,
Sure.
thinking about the improvisation, because
Yes.
I want to talk about storytelling with you in a second, because I know we've
Cool.
got some interesting things to talk about there. But I have recently, probably in the last 4 months, started playing Dungeons and Dragons. I've been doing D&D. Anyone watching this, I have got my Hellfire Club hoodie on today. But doing that activity has taught me stacks about collaboration.
Yeah.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Dungeons and Dragons is basically making stuff up with other
Yeah.
people with a set of guideline rules to guide how you conduct the game, quote unquote, the game. Um,
Mm.
and, as the dungeon master, I prepare pieces of narrative, right?
Yep.
I prepare pieces of narrative and scenarios for people to approach. There is no telling how my party is going to approach those scenarios.
Yeah.
So I have to be prepared to improvise to and against whatever they give me. They feed back, they collaborate with my story. I sometimes have to completely scrap it all. Just go, you know what? They've gone a different direction. I'm going to have to make everything up on the fly.
Mm.
And sometimes, I make a call in the game world that actually turns out to be a destructive or detrimental thing to the game in hand, and I have to own that and go, oh, I made a bad call. Let's just move it on. So it's an interesting thing, that nature of collaboration in games and in play. And
Agreed.
I mean, I know you've done some D&Ding in the past as
I,
well.
I've dabbled. Yes.
You've dabbled. Um,
Yeah.
and you are a voracious reader. You say you read a little bit. I know better.
Here and
Like,
then.
how does the whole nature of story and narrative and everything show up just for you in your life?
Huh. Wow. Oh, I have three thoughts. Okay, one is about D&D, one's about my sister, and one's about my dad. So when it comes to D&D, the thing I want to say in real affirmation and support of D&D players is when it comes to presenting, there's a million reasons why we get nervous, and everyone has their own. I think that being in a space like D&D, where you are committing to the bit, to the story, to the adventure, where you are just absolutely swinging for it, meaning this could totally fail. Being able to fail in a safe creative space is so important to the brain because I think it's a muscle. And so if you can play with your friends and practice and just say, okay, I'm a goblin and I'm going to see if I can light my sword on fire and go take that evil tree down. And then you totally, you crit fail, like you roll a one. I think it's good to be able to have a safe place to fail. I know to bring it back, that was Blintock for me, was as much as I hated it, finding a safe place to fail was really necessary for me. So I just think it's beautiful in that way. The second, when I think of story, I think of my sister, because I remember when I first left that fancy corporate job to build my consulting practice, I remember talking to her on the phone and saying, yeah, I'm going to start my own business. And, she's like, just very, okay, do what you got to do. And I said, yeah, I guess I got to read all those business books that I've been avoiding. And she said, you don't have to if you don't want to. She's like, if they don't help you, don't read them.
Mm.
And that advice was almost 10 years ago, but I think about it so frequently. And I think about how important it was for her to tell me, if that's not your thing, don't do that. For some people, they're really helpful. The self-help, the business advice, the 10 ways to be the best business person. I just didn't find a lot in those for me. But what I did find help in was fairy tales and novels and reading different heroes' journeys and how people got through it. Finding quotes that I could use from the Tao Te Ching or The Art of War or poetry like Mary Oliver. Being able to use those quotes when I communicate and when I speak made me feel more like myself. And that's what matters the most as a communicator. So I think story is so personal, and finding the ones that matter to you that you can reference is the most important thing of all. And then the third point on story, I think about my dad. He is someone who is so willing to, how would you say it? Like almost the phrase I want to use is epic size any normal experience. Like
Yeah.
one time I was, he taught me how to be a consultant and how to have my own practice. And we're so bonded over the work experience. I remember one time I was almost late for my flight. Like I almost missed it. And I was just texting him about it as soon as I got in the seat. He's like, you're just like Sam helping Frodo up Mount Doom, and you got there and you're going to fly the eagle home. And I'm like, yes. Every small moment becomes such a bigger one. And he's so willing to go there with me, and he ties it to like a really major story, and it makes life so much more rich and exciting because it's not just sprinting through an airport. Like now you're saving the world, which is, it's a great place to be. So he was always telling stories at the table and tying them back to bigger stories, and those references really made me love the ability to pull from that reference basket, because I think when you share stories and share quotes and share things that matter to you, you're showing who you are without telling.
Yeah.
So I think stories give us a place to be creative and to fail in a safe way. I think finding the ones that matter to you and sharing those is so much more vital than everyone has to read this book. And then when you can reference them comfortably, you're able to make life into, your own story, which is really beautiful.
I love that.
Yeah.
Just sort of maximalizing your own space.
Yes. Yeah. Maximize your experience. It's not
Yeah.
romanticizing, it's maximalizing. How
Yeah.
much bigger could your airport journey be? It could be
This is
huge.
it. I mean, I love a bit of romanticizing, just kind of like
Oh yeah,
making
same.
everything, putting the Sybil Shepherd filter on everything, just making it really soft and
Yes.
lovely, and
Oh,
uh,
so nice. Yeah.
yeah, but just to be able to make everything feel grander, because
Yeah.
human existence is kind of dry a lot of the time.
It's so mundane. You have to. Yeah.
Adulting, you know, patching the cracks in the walls of the house and doing the dishes,
Yeah.
and then we get to escape to different worlds. We get to go and be our martial artist self.
Yep.
We get to go and be the storyteller. We get to go and be the, you know, axe
Yeah.
throwing deadly ninja warrior. Um,
Yeah. It's awesome.
we get to go and do that stuff, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. So
Mm.
how do you find new stories?
Oh man. Sometimes through the it's so boring. Sometimes through Tumblr or Instagram, you'll see some like quote of a book, and then go on a little adventure to go find that book. And then
Yeah.
sometimes a book is just good for that quote. That's okay. Not every book has to be everything to you.
It's a
um,
one-hit wonder.
yeah, I've done that more. I've broken my own heart more than once. So sometimes like that. um, I am not great at book clubs or things that like deliver a book to you monthly because I don't like
Hmm.
being told what to do, and I certainly don't like being told what to read.
Yeah.
That's more of a personal point. I I try to go based on theme and then where I'm at that point. So there was a couple months where it was just haunted house and scary books, and I was like, I have to get out of this for a little while.
Hmm.
This world is great and I enjoy it, and also I can't sleep, so I should probably go read something else. And so then I read like a lighter, sort of thriller that was interesting. It was just like a normal sort of suburban thriller. I worked in a library as my very first job. My first two jobs working in a library and then as a YMCA camp counselor, which I think is the two dichotomies, or it is a dichotomy of my personality, I think.
Yeah.
And so
That's some
I,
spread.
yeah, it's a spread. And so I think that working in the library, I often got in trouble for reading while working, which they frowned upon. But like, what do you like? You go to the beach, you're not going to get wet. Like, sorry, I would do it again. But it really taught me to scan and to look at books and to read the back, to read the front, to read a lot of the first page. And if it feels good, if you feel that intuitive click, then it's probably a good one. I think if you read enough, you pick up a book and you go, yes, like this one is happening for me. That just
Mm.
happened to me with the House on the Hill by Elizabeth Hand.
Yeah.
I could have that title wrong, but it's a Haunting of Hill House retelling, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, and it was so good. I had to stop reading for a month because nothing else was going to hit the same way again. It was
Yeah.
that good. Yeah,
That
sometimes you just know.
happens. Yeah, I feel that sometimes
Yeah,
you end up disappointing yourself.
yeah, yeah.
Just yeah, nothing else quite hits the same.
No, and I've finished more than one book out of spite. I'm pretty competitive, and I don't like to lose to a book, which is so silly. Um, you won't beat me. Uh, More than once, I've done that. I think some books are just take you and capture you, and some books you have to work at for a little while, and then some you read and you're like, I guess. Some I'll resent for the rest of my life. For example, Verity by Colleen Hoover, I think is the worst thing that's ever entered my brain, and I'm angry that I read it. But
I'll put that in like as an anti-show note. It's like just
yeah,
avoid this
yeah,
book.
it's the opposite of it. It's de-influencing or whatever. It's defluencing. Don't read that
Ooh,
book. You don't need
yeah.
to. Um, yeah, but I think when you there's such a magical feeling when you get a really good book, and somewhere in your head you think, okay, pace this out. We got to savor this. We got to, and then it's 2 days and it's gone. So I
Yeah.
think that that's something really cool about reading is the way a story can just take you. Uh,
Mm,
I think it's so magical.
yeah. I I I'd agree. I'd agree. I know. Yeah, that we have shared loves in the book space.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, our scary books. Yes.
Yeah, in our scary book space, and the big one, and because it's a big chunk of a book anyway. The doorstop, House of Leaves.
Ah, I'm so glad you mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was going to
A
come
game
up.
changer.
It is
Yeah.
an absolute. I mean, uh, that book really was life changing.
Hmm.
Like I've never read anything like it.
No.
The presentation of it visually, because it uses visual presentation within
Hmm.
the story, like as part of the narrative, and that in itself is absolutely bonkers. Just yeah, life changing stuff. The story's cooked as well.
Yeah.
It's
It's
just
also just
like
really good.
it's really good, but also I mean it just sends you down a literal rabbit hole.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was one of the first times in a while, perhaps one of the first times as an adult. I read it first when I was about 20 years old, that I picked up a book and I was just really in awe of it. I think
Mm,
many of us were in awe of Harry Potter when we first picked it up, or for me, Tuck Everlasting was a big one as well when I was younger. But I picked up House of Leaves at 20 years old, and I was like, something's about to change. And the way I
Yeah.
knew that was the first page, the dedication page, where it's just one line. And the dedication page says, "This is not for you." And I'm getting chills right now. And I just went, "Oh my God, this is like I was screaming in the Barnes and Noble, like, this is amazing."
Yeah.
And then it was, just terrifying and interesting and deeply compelling. And there was a sense of choose your own adventure because with House of Leaves, you know this, you have the content of the story, and then you have the footnotes, and then the footnotes might take you somewhere else. And so there's a feeling of getting lost in the house while you're reading about it.
Mm.
And I remember reading that book, and it was the first time that someone pointed out why I might like those stories so much. And Mark Z. Danilowski said, "Every ghost story is a love story if you look hard enough." And I think that is my guiding light and why I keep going back to those books is that there's always some light in the darkness, and there's always some big love at the root of these haunted house horror thriller books. There's always something that you're fighting for.
Yeah.
And man, House of Leaves just absolutely rocked my face off. And I was a different person after I read it.
Echo that.
Yeah.
Echo that. It takes you places, and
Yeah.
you have to work at it. I mean, so you said before,
It's
some
an
books you
effort.
have
Yeah.
to work at.
Uh-huh.
At points, you've got to work with that book, and you have
Oh,
to.
yeah.
It's almost like you have to use it as it wants to be used. It's because of
Mm.
how it is structured, how it's presented, the language that's used. You have to work at it.
You're
But
at some points, literally, the text goes around the page. And so you're actively
yeah,
turning the book as you're reading it. Yeah. That book takes
it's
over.
it does take over. I'm really glad they never tried to make an adaptation of it.
Don't touch it. Leave it
Don't,
alone.
dear,
Mm-mm.
dear Netflix, stay away,
There's,
stay
there's,
away.
I wish we would stop remaking good stuff. Stop doing stuff to good stuff. There's plenty of
Mm,
bad stuff to remake.
yeah, this is it.
Yeah,
This
just
is
leave it
it.
alone. Let it live in my head forever.
Actually, that point about Netflix that reminds me of something you said to me
Huh.
once about stories and how you sometimes criticized yourself for not reading things.
Ah, yeah,
But
yeah,
you said to me, and this has stuck with me, is that it doesn't really matter how you get your stories. You could be binging a series, you could be watching a movie, you could be listening to the radio, you could be reading a book. You're
yeah,
still involved in a story,
yeah,
and you can allow yourself to be in that,
yeah.
and it's okay.
I my theory for so long has just been get the story in my system, whatever way works for that
Mm,
story. There's been plenty of audiobooks or podcast stories that I just am hooked on, or there's a TV show that I have to watch everything about. And I think when you are working on your communication skill or you just how you want to tell a story, who cares, man? I think we have been so a little condescending of TV for a long time, and TV is like a really beautiful art. There's
yeah.
plenty of gorgeous television that I've seen in my life that's changed me as a person. I'm thinking about that third episode of The Last of Us, which is a TV show based on a video game. Was that not the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? I
Oh,
was openly weeping.
this is that's the one with Nick Offerman, right?
Oh
That
yeah, that he
episode,
won
yeah,
an Emmy for.
yeah. So that
Yeah.
episode, one of my friends, and also podcast guest Demi Aspie,
Yes.
who was
Yep.
she's had her conversation recently. She and I have talked about that episode, and I believe she actually uses it in her university course material.
As she should. It's
Um,
it. It's a
it's
gorgeous piece of art.
it's absolutely beautiful, and the other thing with that is
Yeah.
it stood out in that series because it was so left field.
Hmm.
Like, and it's such a bold move to take
Yeah.
a fully self-contained story within a wider world
Yep.
in a big budget, high presentation
Yeah.
television series, which is very rarely done,
Yep.
and just say, here you go, folks.
Yeah.
Have 60 minutes of someone else's life, and that's all we're going to give you.
Yep. You get this much, and my God, if it wasn't just so in depth, and I think it makes a very good argument for when stories are told with authenticity, respect, and love versus we're
Mm,
telling this story to try to um, win points or check a box. There's such a distinct difference. It just hits
Yeah.
differently. And it yeah, are you, I can't look at someone and say that story wasn't worthwhile or it wasn't good enough because it was television. I reference TV and movies and books and music so often when I present or I facilitate because they're great connectors. If you've seen Lord of the Rings, then I can now make a metaphor about it and we're going to connect in a different way
Yeah.
than if I hadn't mentioned it. But I remember one time after a training, this guy was like, wow, seems like you watch a lot of TV. Like we were in high school and he was making fun of me. And I was like, yeah, I also do other stuff, but yeah, of course I do.
Mm.
That's my thing. I want to see how people talk to each other and tell a story. So I just think if there's any, yeah, if there's anyone out there thinking they should be doing more or less of the way they get stories, just get a story, however it needs to get to you.
100% that.
Yeah.
200% that. Just, yeah. I think the more that we can respect the stories that we are told, and I'm going to pull my soapbox out a little bit, just
Let's
very
do it.
slightly. I really hate fandom
Huh.
culture.
Okay.
Like, and the whole sort of oh, this version of the story was no good because
Oh,
X, Y, and Z, and
who cares?
so
Yeah.
as we're recording this,
Mhm.
I'm about 2/3 of the way through the new Fallout series
I've
on
heard good
Amazon Prime.
things. Yeah.
I know loads of people hate it because it's not the traditional Fallout
Uh,
story. It's bloody marvelous. Again, similar to The Last of Us, they have
mm-hmm.
created a clever script. They've taken the concept of the wider world and they've told a story about characters who exist within that world. And they respect what's going on, but they're not
Yeah.
trying to make it the cash in
Right.
or the path well trodden.
Yeah.
You know, it exists in the world. You got conceptual stuff, great, check in the box. Now let's tell a good story, and they're doing it,
Yes.
and it's brilliant.
Yeah. Now let's tell a good story. That I
Yeah.
think if that were just our driving force more often than not in the way we communicate with each other, now let's tell a good story. And then what does good mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
And you reverse engineer it from there. I think that's such a great driver versus, oh geez, the calamity of Madam Web. That was just a total, have you,
I
yeah, like
I
the
haven't
movie,
seen it. I didn't see it.
most people haven't.
It was the same as Morbius. As soon as I
Yeah,
heard what people were saying about it, I was like, nah,
me
out.
too. Yeah, I was like, I'm good. Because there's no need, because there's no heart there. And
No.
even on the press tours and things, that's what the actors were saying. And so it's a difference between, perhaps we were doing this for the money or the views or whatever, versus we really love this thing and we want to take care of it and tell a story about it. So the those are just two poles of what can happen. And if you bring it down even more into the microcosm of someone leading a meeting at your work, you can tell sometimes when someone's just repeating what they're supposed to repeat or the boilerplate or they're just trying to get through it
Mm.
versus I care about what I'm talking about. Let me make a few references to things I care about, maybe from my own culture or from my own experience or from books, movies, TV that I've read. And then now let me tell you this other thing that matters. You can tell when someone's heart is in a story. And so if the goal is let's just tell a good story, let's start there rather than uh, what's going to get the most views, what's going to get the most money, what's going to get the most attention. There has to be another goal.
Yes. That was a very pregnant pause. Yes. That feels like a very pertinent point
Yeah.
to round out this conversation. Um, if we can all just tell a better story, everyone's going to be better off.
Yeah. And what is let good mean something different to everybody as
Mm.
well. Like what the way you tell a good story is different, the way I tell a good story different, the way someone else does. But the through lines of being compelling, of maybe showing some vulnerability about yourself, not a major one, but just some honesty about your experience and things that matter to you. Like let that be part of the story. And if you're comfortable using humor and wit do so. And if you're comfortable using metaphor and analogy, do so. If you're comfortable just telling a story straight through with facts and here's what I learned, then do it that way. Whatever way you want to tell a story, let good be the way you define it, not some arbitrary expectation. Because as we've been talking this entire time about so many different art forms, is that perfect doesn't exist. And if it didn't, would it matter?
Yeah. That's that.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you again
Oh my
for
God. Yeah.
hanging out. And I should have tried to make that more seamless as like, oh yeah, we recorded this in one go. No, we didn't.
Oh yeah. No, we just
Lift
want to
the
hang
veil,
out
lift the
more.
veil. Yeah.
We're here.
For anyone who doesn't know where to
Yeah.
find you on the old internet, where can people find you?
Yeah. If you want to see a lot of pictures of my cats, you can find me on Instagram on superkp2. I am on LinkedIn. I will take a while to get there, but I'll find you there if you want to. Katie Phillips. If you want to just email me, you can email KP, as in Katie Phillips, communicates at gmail.com if you're one of those. Otherwise, I'm probably somewhere connected to you as well. So go to Tom and I'll be there.
And there we go.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you for
Thank you.
telling some stories with me. Love it.
Always. This ruled. Thank you so much.